There we go.
Okay, so here we are with the Brain Inflammation Collaborative. Uh, and this is such an interesting project. For one, it's focused on brain inflammation, which has been it's been such a key and interesting aspect of ME/CFS, fibromyalgia, and other diseases for many years. Of course, Jared Younger believes neuroinflammation is it regarding these diseases. Um, and it's very interesting how neuroinflammation can contribute to so many things. It contributes to I can't remember what it is about depression. It's 30 to 40% of people with depression actually have brain inflammation.
Yes.
Um, and treating them with antidepressants probably isn't going to be very helpful. So anyway, so so I want to start off with two quotes from the BIC. Um, uh, we want to demonstrate that neuroinflammation is not a fringe theory, but a foundational principle in understanding mental and physical health. Um, and and we support people who are affected by brain inflammation, but are often not included in clinical research or trials. And that fits most of these diseases that you're studying. So the Brain Inflammation Collaborative, so far as I've been able to tell, has been around since 2023, but you kind of really publicly came out this year. Uh, in April 2025, Solve ME, the Brain Inflammation Collaborative, Chronicle Bio, Complex Disease Disorders Alliance, and Care Evolution. There's a lot of collaboration in there. Launched a partnership to accelerate research into ME/CFS, long COVID, and infection-associated illnesses. The BIC, which is a nonprofit, took over management of Solve Together, a platform through which Solve collected symptoms, wearables, data, and et cetera. And then it expanded it to produce a platform called Unhide, which is a unified platform to advance research, not just to get across ME/CFS and long COVID, but across 30 plus chronic illness conditions. So so this all started. This actually, I'd love to see how this infrastructure projects get started because I think they're so important. They're not flashy. They don't produce flashy results immediately, but they build the foundation um, for research to proceed more effectively, efficiently. I mean, I just think that it's particularly for this field, infrastructure projects are just so important, which is why I was so interested in what you're doing, which is basically building a big infrastructure project. So I sometime around 2010, I think, Solve Money put money into the U plus ME program, um, and over time, um, that has evolved, and then the Brain Inflation collaboration picked it up, and you've added a bunch of stuff. So my first question is, uh, what I always like to think of these projects. People who create these projects, they do it to create something that's missing in the field. Uh, so what was the inflammation initiative? That's not easy to say.
It's not.
Um, Feeling that's missing in these diseases, and you also I take it that a lot of this was started because of your experience with your daughter. Um, and let me see here. Oh, I don't have it. But when she was young, she experienced a number of infections, long-standing infections, and illnesses that just seemed to drag on. And then at some point she was bitten by a tick, and
Yes.
uh,
That was
and her
kind of what broke the dam, that put her over the edge.
so and you had a lot of trouble, getting getting doctors to listen to you. You knew something was wrong, and then even after the tick diagnosis, they were still, many of them were still really unresponsive, and in some cases even, I take it, rather belittling.
Yeah,
So
very much.
so what was it about your daughter's illness and your experience with your daughter's illness that had you start this project?
Well, she was sick, prone to infections her whole life. And, looking back, her pediatrician explained every last one of them away. She was very colicky, but she had thrush numerous times as an infant. And, we did antibiotics and they'd say, we just always moved on. When she was 3, she had strep. Almost her whole third year of life. And then by the time she was 5, she was already experiencing some autonomic issues. She would tell me she'd feel nervous, and there'd be no reason. It'd be summer and we'd be playing cards, but I think she was probably experiencing either a racing heart or fight or flight mechanism being activated for whatever reason. And we had doctors look at it. Oh, she's fine. Different testing. It was always she's fine. She's more sensitive. She's more aware of her body. She's experiencing growing pains, the whole host of things. When she was in 5th grade, she had an abscessed tooth. And after that, OCD started. OCD and kind of the separation anxiety was becoming a thing. And she had trouble with rages, was afraid of going to school. It was probably PANDAS, something in there, some early stages there. Again, no, none of the doctors that we saw knew any of this world at all. And after she had a tick bite, that would have been um, after her 6th grade year. Um, and that was when she really started with all of the POTS symptoms. And I started doing all kinds of Googling. And the internet was just really starting to be where there's blogs and other things. This was about 2012. And I actually came across a blog by Lauren Stiles, and it was her personal blog about POTS and IVIG. And I said, this is Megan, and this is what I need to get for Megan. And so I contributed to a small fund that they were trying to raise for a conference, met Lauren, became involved in the advocacy world there, and it just started this whole uh, thing that I couldn't let go of. We had to make things better for other families. And there was a lab that Dysautonomia International was involved in, the University of Oklahoma, and they were looking at POTS antibodies. So we helped a little bit with keeping their lab afloat, and my Megan got to be part of the study. They actually changed the protocol so she could join when she turned 13. We waited a little bit so she could join. And we used to track her symptoms on a piece of paper and see how it would change with the IVIG. And we tracked lot numbers and all of this stuff. And it just really got me interested in the research side of it. But, there wasn't a lot at that time that advocacy groups were doing with other groups. You just focused on POTS, or Pandas Network focused on Pandas. There was not this collaborative kind of approach at that time. And I kept saying, why can't we look at these things? She kept having new diagnoses added, EDS and MCAS, and why can't we couldn't distinguish between the different symptoms. So I spent some time also at Pandas Network as treasurer, and there I met Dr. Denise Calaprice, who is also one of the co-founders. And I told her sort of what I wanted to do. And, we actually, it was 2021, December, that we started exploring some of this stuff. And we launched in January of 2022. And it took a long time to figure out um, the mechanics of a longitudinal registry. And we had another software provider that was not Care Evolution. And it had varying degrees of success. And so it kind of flew under the radar. And when it must have been 2024, we actually had been following You Plus Me on the Solves website and knew they were doing something similar, and used some pieces up from their website as kind of like inspiration. And then we actually met. and I can't think of his name. He was their CSO at Solve, and we started talking about how can we work together because there's only so many dollars in this space. What can we do to work together so that we're not being redundant? We're not going to finish our platform if you're doing the same thing. So that whole summer, we tried to figure out how to harmonize data. And then it got to be the end of the summer, and Emily Taylor's like, do you want our platform? And, we were like, uh, deer in the headlights for sure. And, it took a little bit of discussion, and we're like, yes, we'd love to take it over.
We can
And
do.
we added mental health components. We added additional diagnoses because I think people either get diagnosed based on what their doctor knows or doesn't know, and it might not be the exact fit that you need, or you don't find a doctor at all. So we didn't want to miss anybody. And they do overlap, and that's another reason to include them all. And we added Spanish, and we have big plans to add other pieces as well. But um, that's kind of how we got here. And really, last year was a huge year of things that we put together. We're putting together an impact report that's going to come out probably in the next couple of weeks. But I'd say that 2025 was an amazing year for us, and we're super excited about 2026. And we've got people all of a sudden emailing, asking how they can collaborate with us, and researchers. And does that answer your question? And I don't even know what you originally asked me, I guess, but
It does. It answers a couple of my questions. That's thank you very much.
good, good. I didn't get a chance to go through the list. I had calls right up until this, so
No, that was great. So I want to some stats about what's happening with Unhide. More than 3,000 people are currently enrolled. They contributed about 74,000 days of symptom data, and nearly half have linked their wearable devices, and a quarter have integrated their electronic health records. A majority have ME/CFS or long COVID. Um, and I just want to say that I was part of Solve's database, um, and I just uploaded years of Garmin and URA data to it. It was very, very easy to do, and I'm
amazing.
gonna upload my electronic health data to it. And
Thank you so much. Yeah, and don't hesitate always to provide any feedback or thoughts you have on how to make it more patient friendly. The help email address is actively monitored by myself and our clinical research associates, and we're always receptive to any feedback that participants have.
yeah, I don't really have any suggestions. It
I'm
was
glad to
super
hear
simple.
it.
And it just downloaded it. It was great, and
Good,
just
yeah.
the idea that I can so easily contribute to research
Yeah.
because I have years of data from those devices. So that was
Yeah,
that
that was
was that.
really you
Do you have
it,
in? I wanted to ask. I know Lumia. I don't know how many people have the Lumia device, but it'd be fascinating to see if you could get their data on there with their collecting with the up and down uh assessing what's going on. Hi, Audie. Yes.
oh,
Okay. Well, with regard to the pediatric element, which is really novel, and I take it it was not easy. It's not easy to get pediatric data, which is maybe one reason why we have so little of it. You really
Yeah.
have to jump through a lot of hoops to be able to get children in there. Um, I remember during long COVID, I distinctly remember them saying that, COVID-19 really doesn't affect children much. And I don't remember, I really don't remember anything being said about long COVID in children. Uh, uh, so what do we know about that now? Is it different in versus adults in children? Are you seeing a different patterns there? Can you tell? Can you tell by
Yeah.
now?
Well, there is a lot of data within Recover, and I am a patient rep on Recover as well, as well as I work with a lot of the different organizations in this space, as well as being the principal investigator with Unhide. I So yeah, it was baloney that COVID doesn't affect children. I think that was very much wishful thinking, right? Like it's absolutely untrue. And I think I knew that as a parent right from the beginning. I was sick. I have long COVID myself, and that's how I got into this space.
I just
I
wanted to mention, yeah,
Mhm.
that that several of the big team members, you all have lived experience with the illness, which is
Yeah,
great. I
many
mean,
of us do. Yeah,
it's not,
yeah,
it's great. It's great for, the project. It's not great
yeah.
for you guys, but
No,
you know,
no. Many of us do. Not all of us, but many of us do have lived experience, either as
an
caregivers
organization.
or
Yeah.
ourselves, or
Mhm.
yeah. And yeah, I was. My son was 3 at the time, and he was in a hospital daycare with many children, many other hospital workers, and I worked in a hospital laboratory at the time. And I had I was denied testing. Testing in March of 2020 was just so hard to come by in many parts of the country. And forget about testing for my 3-year-old who was sick, the day or two before I developed symptoms,
Oh, yeah.
and he was sick for 3 months, and like he did get better, but he had intermittent fevers. He had all sorts of symptoms for 3 months, and his doctor's like, well, he didn't have COVID. There's no way I was like, well, I lost my sense of taste. So that's why I was very sure that my illness was indeed COVID, despite not having had a test. And I was very, very, very sick. And so I was like, I feel pretty sure that he had COVID, but because he didn't get tested, and for those first early years of the pandemic, it was so hard to get children tested. So you had this crazy situation where they're like, well, COVID doesn't affect kids, but then they're not testing kids, particularly in the beginning. They're building upon, it just became this kind of snowball of misinformation from that. But yeah, I would say most of the data at this point, there was some decent OHS data before they shut that down in the UK on long COVID in kids. But now I think most of the data is coming from Recover. And I am happy to have worked with them on a number of their pediatric studies, and it does look different. And I can get into a little bit of why it's so hard to do pediatric research and why it's so expensive to do it, by even just explaining some of these results. It doesn't only look different in kids. Kids are not like one homogenous group, right? Like they have broken down the symptoms in, babies and the 0 through 2 age range. Like that looks different from the 3 to 5 age range, like the kind of daycare age range, which looks different from the school age children, which, 7 to 12, which is different from the adolescents who are 13 through 17. And that's different from young adults, which is 18 through 25. So to do this research properly, you want to be able to break down childhood into all of these different groups. And that's on the scientific side. On the ethical and consent side, you also have to go through separate IRB approvals and then come up with separate protocols for all of these different populations that are developmentally appropriate, so that you're assuring them of the correct that the correct protections are in place. So you need parental assent in order to participate. You're going to have to develop different language for, school age kids versus adolescents. And so it just makes it very expensive. And then you're dealing with a population that you always have to have both the parent as well as the participant in. So you're recruiting 2 people at once, dealing with parents who are overwhelmed with their own schedule and financial demands, and they're also having to take care of a sick child on top of the difficulties that are inherent in recruiting any sort of population with an illness. So it is very difficult and very expensive to do pediatric research. So that's why it does lag behind that of adults. But I did think this is one reason I came over to the Brain Inflammation Collaboratives, because Christy and I really shared this passion for making sure that children are included, and their families as well. And it's just incredibly important, not only from, we want to, make sure that they're included from an ethical perspective and things like that, and not excluding certain groups of people. But from a neurodevelopmental perspective, what is the long-term impact of getting a terrible infection like this that creates neuroinflammation at these very specific points of neurodevelopment? I should also add, if pregnant women get it, then the babies are born. That's also another facet of, pediatric research. So there's just a lot to take into consideration with pediatric research. And I just think it's incredibly important to understanding really the etiology of these disorders, and the origins and the roots of it. There are a number of people who have ME that I'm aware of who say, something wasn't quite right throughout their childhood and adolescence, and they didn't know
Right.
what it was, or they got a mono infection when they were like 11 years old, and then they just never really were themselves, but they were able to function until suddenly, another precipitating event happened, when they're in their late teens or something like that. So really understanding, what's happening longitudinally over development. And like you said, building the infrastructure to do that was just incredibly important to me. And my
Well,
background before I got sick, I did developmental neurobiology. So this is something that's always been just
mm.
fascinating intellectually to me, and just I think absolutely critical to try to understand.
Well, I think it's so important. I mean, I know people who uh, they they kept coming down with colds during their childhood. They kept having trouble getting over the colds. Very similar to Christie's child. And there's obviously something wrong going way back. But now that they're just left with their memories of what happened. But now you've actually created a way to track things as they're happening, so that you can see these different stages. What happens to a child when they're 5 and something happens, versus what happens when they're 9 and they get sick or they have an infection or whatever. I think long term the results are just going to be fascinating. One of the really interesting things was the idea that Unhide can help parents pick up signs that something strange, something is off, that they may have some sort of neuroinflammatory illness, and they can use the data they get to take to their doctor or maybe find the appropriate doctor. Can you talk about that?
So Megan, do you want to talk about that piece, or do you
Oh
want me?
yeah, I was gonna leave that to you, Christy, because
Okay.
I feel like that was a lot of Christy's vision went into
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
So I don't know if so obviously you have used the app. One of the things like um, the pandas world specifically, kids become they have such dramatic symptoms and they're not believed by doctors. And from crazy sleep issues, this is a way to print a PDF to kind of highlight what does a month look like with your child, because trying to track all of those things, and you go into a doctor's appointment and you've got this big binder of all of these things and you're trying to explain it to your doctor and they just don't take you seriously. So having a way to kind of keep that organized and have it in a way that shows, see, look at what their sleep looked like, this is what they were eating, these are things that we tried as interventions, and being able to actually have something that's on paper that somebody can look at and say, this is what it looked like for us, and being able to have your doctors take it seriously.
I would think, saying my daughter got an infection and that she experienced severe headaches, nausea, whatever. She had difficulty standing, whatever, and just seeing that visually presented
Yeah.
in that way would be much more impactful than a parent saying, oh, she got really sick, and it took so
Yes.
long, and
And it's sometimes hard to recall order of events or what things really look like over a month, again, without having your doctor think that you're just not crazy, but maybe that enters their mind that you're exaggerating, or this isn't something that you're remembering correctly, but you have a concrete, and it's a little bit different with the wearables with kids and the data we can collect. But when you get into the adolescents and the wearables, I mean, that even backs it up further. You can see the actual heart rate changes. I don't know if you've used the Aura Ring, but I really like that one, and the sleep that it tracks, and heart rate variability, and all of these things that you can't dispute that the patient is experiencing.
So you're collecting all this. You have all this wearable data. You have symptom data. You have you have family history data.
Validated assessments.
So you have all this data, and so is there an effort being made to kind of create subsets? People who have certain symptoms, maybe they have certain scores on their heart rate variability. Maybe their sleep is really bad. I really love the Oura Ring, by the way. That's my
Yeah, so do I.
yeah. Um, um, maybe it's triggered. Maybe their illness was triggered in a certain way. I mean, there seems I mean, my MECFS and my partner's MECFS is so different, except for the fact that we are both really functionally impaired. Um, and we both experience, we both have problems with pain. Other than that, I mean, it's really very different. Um, she has different symptoms. She reacts to medications differently. Different medications help her that might help me. So is any effort being made to kind of throw all this data together? And I mean, it sounds like a really big project, but you know,
It is a
uh,
huge project. And yeah, thanks for that question. Yeah, I do think 2025 was our building year. We were really building this platform and putting all the components. And in addition to pediatrics, we also finished the year by completing a full Spanish language translation of the
no,
platform
that's
and
great.
getting that
Yeah.
through IRB approval. So that really was our building year. And now we are applying for funding so that we can do these sort of analyses. But we are going
Oh.
to start with, we had the brief what helped, what didn't survey in
Hmm.
there. And I think, because I do think that question is probably the most urgent for patients, as what you're saying, what people with what symptoms and diagnoses, what treatments are helping them, because there's so little guidance right now, in terms of segmenting that down. I've seen so much of your writing. Both Christy and I read this at times all the time. And it that kind of almost a rule of MECFS trials and long COVID. It's like a third of the patients it helps, a third of the patients get worse, a third of the patients have no effect, and you don't know how you're going to fall at all when you decide to start a new drug or a new treatment, and it can be really scary. And so I think that's what we plan to do. We are applying for additional funding and looking to work with other organizations, but I think looking at that survey is on the books and on the horizon for this year, kind of regardless of whether we get a lot of the grants that we'll be able to go more in depth, incorporate more wearable device data and things like that if we get more funding for it. But yeah, I think that's how we're going to enter that question is through the what helps what didn't survey, if that makes sense, to try to identify what patients are responding to which treatments.
I really like the what helps, what doesn't survey, which by the way, I believe anybody who enrolls into the database can
Mhm.
take.
Exactly. Yeah, it can be, yeah, any diagnosis that they have.
Yes. Because it's so easy. It's this questions are so simple. It's like, what treatments helped you the most? What treatments helped you less? What treatments didn't work? It's just this kind of open-ended question that is really, it's just very easy to answer. And as you know, as with the rest of your website, you can pause and it will save your data and all that. I noticed you have some early data, and it really intrigued me. What really kind of got me was that, what helped. Pacing, pacing is
Yeah.
always at the top. You
Yeah.
know, we really need to find something that can replace pacing,
I know.
at some point.
Yeah.
That's kind of an indication of where we are.
Yeah.
Uh, but Yeah, yeah, and with that, you could conceivably determine subsets, people who types of people who might respond to this or that, or you know, and that would just be fascinating. I
Yeah.
mean, I recently tried Mestinon, and boy, it really that's on your list. That's one of your
Yeah.
top
It was.
10
It
medications.
was in the top 10. Yeah. Yeah.
It really helped. Uh,
I'm glad to hear.
until I fell apart, which is what happens when I do with things that really help. I just fall apart afterwards. But it was really, really, really effective. And I'm just trying it very small doses now.
Yeah.
Uh, and then there's the really intriguing brain fog study. Uh, uh, there are various cognitive assessments used in MECFS, and they capture some of it. They capture some of it, but I don't think they really capture the experience of brain fog very well. And you guys are going at it in an entirely different way. Can you explain what you're doing with that? And then again, this is another simple survey you can take, right? If
Yep.
you enroll in the and it's part of a study that's going on, and
That's right, in
yeah.
collaboration with Dr. Mariko Voldina at Columbia University. Yeah, so it was developed in collaboration with her, and
Did
she's
she
using that.
did she reach out to you? Uh, how did this come about?
Yeah, she did reach out to us through the website. This was right before I started at BIC. So
Hmm?
is that right, Chrissy? She just reached
Yeah,
out to
she
the
had
website,
reached
and
out
then
to when Denise was the PI. She had reached out.
Uh-huh. She
And
saw you're gathering a lot of data. They had a big population, and
yeah, and I think
okay,
that really, you talk about how simple it is. That's really something that we focus on, making sure that patients can, it's not high burden, but that we get, information that's useful. And there isn't parameters around how does a 5-year-old describe brain fog? How does someone who's a teenager, or someone who's early teens, or an older person? It's a different experience for everybody. And I think clinicians just really, again, kind of going to long COVID doesn't impact kids. Brain fog, it doesn't either. It is an easy one to say, but it could be that they're expressing it in a way that is very different than, an adult would. So you don't think of it as being the same thing. So.
right, right.
yeah, and the overall aim of that study, it does have actually within that study, we've embedded one of the promise questionnaires on neurocognitive assessment. So you may not realize as you're
Mhm.
taking it, but in the middle of this study, and there's the adult version and the different pediatric version. So we're getting that validated tool within the survey that we'll be able to use to compare where our responders are at to what's been published in the literature as well. But really the overarching goal, and I don't know, did you catch the webinar last week on the brain fog survey?
No, I
We
didn't.
should
No,
send them
I
the
missed it.
link. We just
Yeah,
gave
Yeah,
we
yeah.
just gave a webinar on it on Thursday, so I'll give you the link because it's Mara spoke extensively about it, and yeah, I
Oh,
think you'd
yeah.
like it. Yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, essentially our goal is to really better understand the symptom that's so prevalent and so common and yet so poorly quantified and described by both clinicians and patients. Like I know a lot of patients even find the term brain fog to be a bit condescending, not really encompassing the full spectrum of how cognitively impaired they feel.
Mm,
And yet a lot of people with brain fog, they score normally on a lot of neurocognitive assessments. So we're trying to figure out what might be going on. We've already spoken Tamara about doing a medication as a special interest for brain fog as a follow-up survey from this. So we'll look at some of the other data that's within Unhide, including medication use and the other survey data. And that's what's so nice about the platform is that all of this is linked together. And I hope that we're collecting in a way that's not too high of a symptom burden on people, but we're getting a tremendous amount of information. Because if you can imagine, if people had to sit down and do all of this at once, this is like a whole weeks worth of surveys, but I'm hoping the way that we space them out and allow people to do it in their own time and space and energy permitting, that we are still able to gather all of that information. It's linked, and a lot of it is real time, so we're not relying on retrospective questions. So I think this sort of longitudinal data collection really is the gold standard for the type of studies that we're trying to create. And by collaborating with us, Mara is able to she reaches this very large population base, and is also able to link it with all of this other data that's in the platform already.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I really like, I mean, you have these kind of these quick and easy surveys, and then but you also have, the validated, questionnaires,
Yeah.
which I guess it's really necessary for researchers to be able to see those
Yeah.
and maybe use those to pluck out patients that they want in their samples. And I believe, those are longer, and some of them are long. I guess some of them are
Some of
not
them are
very
long. Yeah,
long.
it's a mixed
Yeah.
mixed bag. Some of our in-house ones are a bit long. We have a mood and behavioral one that's long, and the brain fog questionnaire is a good 20 minutes at least too.
Yeah.
Then the GAD-7 is a really short mental health questionnaire on anxiety, so that one's really quick. But yeah, we try to space them out as well in terms of their delivery, and they are all optional for participation. Like people can really come as they are, and they can participate to the extent that they are able to, but whatever they're able to contribute, we'll be able to use.
Yes. I still gotta do those questionnaires.
No pressure. Never any pressure.
Yes. Only the pressure that I add. But anyway, so with regards to research, so I think Christy said one of your goal is to centralize research in the neuroinflammatory space. I guess there's a lot of research going on all over the place, but you want to have a central place for it. Can you explain what you mean by centralized research in the neuroinflammatory space and how that might help everybody, I guess, all sorts of neuroinflammatory diseases?
Christy, do you want to start with the collaborative and then I can
That
give
sounds
like
like a
a
big goal.
specific example?
Yeah,
Example?
it really is a big goal, but when you think about that there's only so many dollars in the space, and I think it's frustrating when you think of different advocacy groups creating symptom tracking for their own whatever their diagnoses is that they advocate for, and it creates all of these kind of fragmented tracking of whether it's EDS or mast cell or whatever. We want to do it all together so that we can kind of see, like we're talking about how different people react. And so you can say, this is the family history, this is the symptoms they have, what's different about somebody else who doesn't react to a certain treatment or whatever. But being able to kind of have that hub where research can be built upon, and we're not having this redundancy, and patients only have so much that they can give, and we're not asking them to give it in 8 different places. It's just in one place, and again, people can keep building on that. And we really want the advocacy groups to help with, finding clinicians or advocating legislative work and all of the things that they still do, but we can help them get stats that are for their community and help connect to their researchers and their patient communities. It's really something that needs to be a collaborative lift because there's so much here. And I don't think that any one group could be the be all answer. But if we can work together and everybody does their separate pieces, it becomes more manageable and more eyes on something. And maybe somebody gets an idea based on somebody else's research and builds on that.
And I wanted to give you asked about outcomes, and I do want to say I very much appreciated what you said at the beginning of the call about us building infrastructure and how you saw that and appreciated that, Court, because that, that's the point that we try to make, and I don't feel like everyone understands the
Yeah,
importance of that. So
agreed.
I definitely appreciate that you did look at us and you saw that immediately. And I can, one of the things that I wanted to point out about give a solid example about why is this important that we build this and we work together. Most of these conditions, most of us, as we go through the years after our first diagnosis, we rack up a number of different comorbidities. Like it might be ME plus MCAS plus EDS, all of these things kind of come to the forefront. And it means something to each individual patient because it can give them and their clinician ideas of what might help them individually. But if we think about bigger and about building clinical trials, right? Because that's what we really need. We need better clinical trials for these conditions because we don't have a biomarker yet. And I don't know that there is, I would love a biomarker. I don't know that there is realistically one that's going to be a one size fits all on the horizon. And and even if we get one for a diagnostic biomarker, is that going to be a biomarker that can be used to assess the disease state in clinical trials? We don't know that. Right now, what we have is a lot of PROs, patient-reported outcomes. And I don't want to name names because we're on the record, but in the month or two before I joined BIC, there was a clinical trial that I had been watching very closely, and it was a pharma clinical trial. They hadn't published, the specifics of their outcomes and things like that before the data was released. And it failed. The agent that they were testing, it failed clinical trial. And I looked at the outcome measure and I was like, I came from the field in which this agent was being trialed, and I'm like, this was tens of millions of dollars, at least, possibly into the hundred millions of dollars that had been invested to bring this to a phase 2 clinical trial and for long COVID. And it just failed. And I looked at their outcome measure, I was like, that was completely invalid, and they had the points in time were very limited. They didn't have anything longitudinal like Unhide. They weren't looking at any wearable data, which I think gives you an objective measure of how people with ME/CFS and long COVID are functioning, and how we're doing. It was one assessment was the primary endpoint. So I think in order to build better clinical trials, we need to better understand these disorders. We need to have both objective and subjective data, and it needs to be collected in the way that we're collecting them. So that really is the overarching, goal is to make sure that we can properly assess the agents that are being developed by pharma. And I don't think that the field is there yet. And we want to make sure that we want to build that. And that's really, the goal of what we're doing here.
Yeah. It's interesting because, some of these big long COVID trials, the researchers they're not coming from the ME/CFS,
No.
fibromyalgia, MCAS, EDS space. They're coming
Yeah.
from their space, and they are, in some cases, they seem to be applying things from their space that may not apply to us. I'm really wondering about the GLP-1 agonist trials, which are starting
Yeah.
people off at a typical, um, very high dose for
Yeah.
people with long COVID and ME/CFS. And I'm sure there are other, like you pointed out, there are other examples where they may be missing things. And sometimes if you just miss one thing, it can just destroy what could be a good clinical trial.
Yeah, it could be a
Um,
good agent, and you throw out the baby with the bathwater,
yeah,
and because you don't have the right outcome measure, and you will never get that drug to clinical trial again because of all the investment,
right.
how expensive it is. And so, yeah, it's really, I mean, it's tragic. It really is. Yeah, if that happens, and
Yeah.
I think it is happening in this field.
So do you think that that drug, that as yet unnamed drug, but we'll try and get it, that's that's yet unnamed drug. Do you think it might have done better if they had used different outcome measures, or if they'd done
Yeah,
trial
I do think
differently?
so. And yeah, I do. If it was, there were two aspects of it, and they didn't solicit patient input. This company did
Yeah.
not solicit patient input when they were designing the trial. They did solicit patient input for recruitment, but that was it. No input was gone into the trial design. And yes, I do think it would have done better because the phase one was very promising.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
There's also
Yeah.
soliciting patient input and then acting on the patient input. That's the next step. Uh,
Hmm.
um, which is why it's so great to have people with lived experience,
Yeah.
you know, participating heavily in these things. Um, well, so one of Unhide's goal is to make research studies quicker, easier to do, and more effective and cheaper. Uh, can you explain how Unhide can do that for researchers?
Do you want to speak to the economic side,
Yeah,
Christy?
well, I think some of that too also includes making sure that the participants are diverse. And so you think about people in rural areas or people that aren't financially able to get to research. Um, they can do it from their house. And then also if you're bedridden or those different types of things, it's something that you can participate in and you can save it as you go and complete it as you can. So I think just from that aspect, you don't have the travel, and then you're not missing out on the people that couldn't travel or couldn't afford to travel. So that was something that was really important is you have a lot of statistics around groups that marginalized groups that aren't included and women's health and different pieces that and of course the pediatric population that just aren't represented. And so this is a much simpler and a cheaper way of doing that.
I want to say that I was astonished at how expensive it is to recruit patients, to find and recruit patients. I can't remember what the typical percentage of the budget it took up in research studies, but I was really surprised at how
Yeah,
difficult it was to recruit patients. So you're like a research recruitment platform in a sense because you have all these patients together,
absolutely.
and you
And
have data on them,
And
and
if we work with the advocacy groups and tap into their communities, we can absolutely provide the app, the symptom tracking, and the things that, for self discovery or an empowerment of your symptoms and trying to see how things impact you, but also being able to I lost my train of thought there, but that you're able to have the advocacy groups be able to reach a bigger population. So the more advocacy groups that we partner with, the farther the reach that we have, and we absolutely can help researchers recruit if that's what they're interested in. The more advocacy groups we work with, the farther the reach we have.
right, and you're bringing in pediatric children, you're bringing in people in the rural areas, you're bringing in people who are homebound or housebound. They can participate in certain types of
Yes.
studies.
And so many people want to be able to compete in research, but just don't have the method to do it. And I know being part of the Pandas Pans world, the parents are fierce. They want to help. They don't want other families to go through. And I'm sure it's very similar in the CFS world and caregivers. They don't want other people to keep going through this, and so they are great to use as because they can't get enough, and they don't have to go anywhere.
Very good, very good. Um, so one thing I'm really interested in is omics data, genomics, transcriptomics, microbiomics, proteomics. There's so many omics out there. Um, so can you incorporate omics data into your platform now? That seems like a huge task to do that. Um, I wasn't
we
really sure if you guys can do
we
that.
can. So I'll let Megan kind of do the details, but anytime, I mean, we can facilitate different panels or tests that can be taking place, and then the results can be uploaded into the database as well. So, if a specific researcher is looking to collect data on a lactate sensor or a specific panel, that can be added to their individual study, and that data can be incorporated into the data that's collected. So I don't know if you want to add anything more specific on that, Megan, or.
Yeah, I'll say we don't currently have any researchers who are using the our database to partner to recruit and to patients into omics type of studies. We did work with, well, it was a collaboration that was established when the platform was under the governance of Solve. But we've completed Dr. David Esteban's study, which was actually funded by the Patient-Led Research Fund. So I think it's a really nice example of collaborating together in this space. And he was doing a microbiome study on people with long COVID and ME. And that we've just handed off, I think, the last of the data to him that he needed about the participants in the platform. So I think that was a nice example of it. And we're taking some feedback from him in terms of how we can make, the recruitment process more streamlined and a bit easier on them, and trying to just make sure that we're being receptive to what researchers need as well as what patients need from the platform. So yeah, I absolutely would be interested in partnering with other collaborators who might want to do other omics studies going forward. I think that if we can handle the survey data, we can help with the recruitment, and if they can handle the biosample collection, it's a really fantastic partnership.
Oh, it would be great to be able to, look at the different biological pathways found in ME/CFS versus fibromyalgia versus long COVID versus some of the other, looking at multiple sclerosis
Yeah.
patients. What diseases can be included in the platform right now? They all have in common neuroinflammation,
Yeah,
I guess.
exactly.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. So we have added a couple others, like even ones where you might not think of them in this symptom or in this disease cluster, like gastroparesis and endometriosis. We've added
oh
into the
yeah, yeah,
platform
yeah.
because there is evidence of significant neuroinflammation in both of those conditions. And they are common comorbidities of a number of the other conditions that we already were studying. So yeah, we have a lot in there. And I think it is really interesting to look at conditions that are very well established as neuroimmune, like MS, where you do have, your mechanism and your biomarker identified side by side with conditions like ME, which I think we all very strongly think is neuroimmune, and there is a lot of evidence that it is, but we don't have that kind of really, from A to Z line that they've
Mm.
established with MS. So I think looking at these side by side. And I was really surprised when we talked to MS patient advocates at how many of them were infection triggered as well. Like how many of them were
Mm.
like, I was doing well and then I got a tick bite and then I didn't get better and then my diagnosis was MS, or they had a Lyme exposure or mono or something like that. And it was something that I think is missing from the literature. And I have a PhD in neuroscience, and this was not anything that we had discussed when we are talking about MS, when I was learning about it in the textbooks. And I
Mm.
know that those textbooks are being rewritten with the EBV connection being pretty well established with it
Right.
now. But I was very surprised at how many of them had a Lyme infection or another tick-borne infection prior to their diagnosis as well. So I thought that was really interesting, and it really, from a patient point of view, kind of solidified the connection between MS and ME for me, in terms
Mhm.
of, I think there could be something similar, at least in terms of a triggering event between these conditions. So I think, yeah, I'm excited to look at this data in aggregate and other conditions like PANS and PANDAS, which are more pediatric, but it's definitely infection associated. And how does, I think one question is, it is challenging to recruit pediatrics, and we've only just opened the pediatric platform. So we definitely need to have more kids in there. But I'm really interested to look at, what does PANS look like as compared to long COVID in kids? What's the overlap with symptoms? And where are, how does long COVID, does it differ from PANS? And if so, how, So I think comparing some of these, there's so much work to do.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm talking. I
It's
talk myself
hard not
into
to.
just having no, not pacing well for the foreseeable future.
I was just so struck by the different conditions that you're covering: dysautonomia,
Yeah,
chronic Lyme,
yeah,
Sjogren's syndrome. That's a big one.
yeah,
That's potentially a really big one. Multiple sclerosis, myasthenia gravis.
yeah,
Very soon we had a story of a woman who was diagnosed with ME/CFS for years, and she ended up having myasthenia gravis, rheumatoid
yeah.
arthritis, major depression, bipolar depression, PTSD, traumatic brain injury. That's another. That's very.
Trigger.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's if people who have these conditions or know people who have these conditions, get in the database.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
um, so I was wondering, what about past studies that have publicly available data? Can there's the NAS intramural study. There's a severe ME/CFS study by the Open Medicine Foundation. I don't know how many of the NIH studies have, they have uh, public data. But what about, is there any way to get those into the database? And I mean, I imagine that would take a lot of work. Um, but I just had this vision of, you know, all this data from all these different illnesses and somebody, hooking up their supercomputer to it and saying, "Oh, look at the biological pathways in rheumatoid. These are the same as we see in ME/CFS. Are these two pathways are, and then these are different, and this connects to this, and particularly with the infectious trigger, you wonder, is there a central starting place, or with all this fatigue, with the fatigue
Yeah.
and exhaustion and post-exertional malaise. It'll be interesting to see how many people with these other diseases experience post-exertional malaise. um, if there are some core similarities. um, I know you guys are a small organization, that would be a big ask, but
Well, I
is
can
that
say just
potentially
to
possible?
yeah, to tell you a little bit about how the sausage gets made. I was already exploring this idea in terms of, for example, we were approached by a researcher, and I don't know that she's going to actually have the bandwidth right now, but to do a long-term follow-up on a Pans and Pandas cohort that had been started over a decade ago. And
um,
but yes, theoretically, it is possible we would researchers could link to the data from that study through an identifier to our study. So when we're doing this sort of study, it's always paramount that the information that we're passing on is de-identified. It's anonymous. We need to protect patient privacy. That's the only risks to anyone participating in this is patient privacy. So we have to always make sure that's our number one concern, no matter what, is to ensure that patient privacy is always protected. And we have a certificate of confidentiality. So we're different from a for-profit entity in that way, where you don't really know what you're signing. We have a much stronger standard of responsibility here, I think, than any for-profits that I'm aware of in this space. And so yeah, theoretically, yes. The answer is yes, we can link some of this. And interestingly, there are there are going to be technical issues though, in terms of like harmonization of how the data was collected, how the questions were asked, things like that. And that's actually how we got involved with Solve in the first place, because all we were planning to do is try to link our pediatric database with them. So we wanted to to make sure that we were collecting data in the same way, that we were having, a harmonized data effort. And as we were building our platform, we wanted to make sure that we could link it to everyone who was involved together and we could look at all this data together. And then Emily's like, well, you guys are taking this so seriously. Why don't, what do you think about just taking over Solve together, and we can combine the platform. And so that's how those talks started with Solve and me, was on a data harmonization effort. And yeah, so we absolutely have those conversations with other organizations who are live connecting data, for collecting data, that we may be able to connect in the future. But yeah, I think it would be great to be able to link, particularly if we do have some of the same participants. I think it
Yes,
would
yeah.
be amazing just to look at, how are they doing now? How are they doing then? And especially now we have so many modalities that we can get data from, including wearable devices that weren't available when a lot of these research initiatives were started, or else they weren't affordable. So yeah, I do think that's on the horizon. And I did see your last question about the 5 years. That's definitely part of the 5 year plan, is doing a couple of these studies where we are linking to other databases.
Yeah, so why don't we get to that? What would you like to the brain brain inflammation initiative to be doing in 5 years? If you could, like, this is
I
your
can, yeah, I
baby.
can say I would like for us as I was just saying, I would like for us to at least have one or two of these other collaborations with other databases under our belt. And Christy and I speak about international as well. International IRB approval is really difficult. Right now, we are limited to the US participants.
Right.
But we would really like to have at least a couple more countries that we can be operating in, so we can collaborate with more researchers, and we can look at different trends in patients globally, and allow patients to participate globally as well. And so that's something I think but that will require funding and investment in order to build. It's difficult to go through the protocols and the approvals in every different country, and then there are some countries like Canada where you go in province by province as well. So
Oh,
it does make it more tricky, yeah. So and I personally, I would say I want us to be more involved with clinical trial outcomes. I'd love for us to have an agent that is being tested, and people who are clinical trialists to be using our database, or even if they aren't using Unhide direct, ideally I would love for them to be using Unhide, but if they are not using Unhide, I want it to inform how they're selecting these outcomes for clinical trials at the very least, because we do have all of this data. So I really want to make that impact in the field, and that might be a bit of an aggressive timeline for 5 years, but I guess it's speculative right now. And Christy, you can answer as well.
Yeah, I think really kind of expanding the pediatric piece, what
Yeah,
happens when you're younger and
yeah.
following that. And, you talk about, well, Dr. Jenny Frankovich at Stanford it has some really good talks about kids that start out with Pandas pans. They often end up with rheumatoid arthritis or psoriatic arthritis as adults, or POTS is another big one. And why is that? And it's heavily female populations, but of course not only that, but why do some people get better? Why do some people not? Because it's quite stark in the Pandas pans world of getting, say, IVIG, and some people it's one and done. Other people, you need, like my daughter gets IVIG monthly and she has for 12 years, but it keeps her in a really great place. So, why is that different? And what does that look like? What is your family history or your symptoms or whatever it is that you end up with these other comorbidities later in life? So, there's really just so much to get done that, we are a small team, and being able to grow again, with additional funding, I think that it's really exciting to think about all of the pieces that we can touch with these different comorbidities in the platform already, and others that we could add potentially. We kind of have a catch-all one, right, Megan? That, if somebody's experiencing different things that look like it's neuroinflammatory, we do have a catch-all. So it's even more than what we have listed.
Yeah, yeah. Basically, we wouldn't exclude anyone who wanted to contribute to the platform. Yeah, we do get contacted by people with very rare diagnoses sometimes that are not explicitly listed, but yeah, yeah. And I think, as you had alluded to in terms of a long-term goal is definitely the biobanking as well. It was something that BIC had, it was part of the conceptualization when BIC was born, and
Hmm.
that the omics work and the biobanking would be a part of it. But I think, we operate on a remote, kind of disseminated organizational infrastructure, and
Hmm.
I think we would need to find a trusted partner for the biobanking. But if we could get funding or, a collaboration happening where we handled this longitudinal data collection and someone else was handling the biobanking, that partnership would also be a fantastic thing that ideally
Yeah.
could happen within the next five
It was
years.
overly aggressive what we wanted to do in the beginning, and we had to kind of pare back a little bit. So the feasibility and the cost alone of creating a biobank from the start just wasn't in the cards. But, like Megan said, finding a good partner for that would um, be amazing as well.
I just want to note that your daughter, she's becoming she is an anesthesiologist,
So
or
she finishes, she'll have her master's in anesthesiology. So she'll do all of the work, and then the anesthesiologist, oversees that. But she just absolutely loves it. And she's always texting me. They're learning a little bit about the neuroinflammatory piece, just here and there. And she's like, that's probably what I have. And I'm like, oh, Megan, it's just all of the things that I've tried to teach her along the way. And, she went through some really hard, um, things in her life. And I think for her sanity, she kind of shut down in different areas and absorbed different things as she needed and forgot about other pieces. And now it's just kind of all coming together for her right now. And it's fun to see that.
it's great that IVIG has really helped her. I mean,
Yeah,
just
life
if we could just
changing.
identify people for whom IVIG helps,
Yeah,
that would be a huge that would be a
yes,
huge help.
yeah.
Because sometimes when it helps, it really, really helps.
Yeah, and sometimes it doesn't at all, and it's hard to kind of I contain my excitement, and I can't tell somebody, oh, this is going to be amazing for you because I've done that, and for some people, it's not been the case.
I forgot to ask one thing that I thought was really interesting. Uh, so using the platform, um, you can apparently, it's hard. How do you say this? A treatment seems to be working, and then you crash. Say you crash, and you blame it on the treatment, but maybe it wasn't the treatment. Maybe something else was going on that caused your crash, and you associated it with the treatment. And apparently, with Unhide, you can kind of tease those two apart. Can you talk about that? Because I think that's really important. We're so up and down. It's hard. It's really hard to tell what's contributing to what.
Yeah, so I think when you're inputting all of your data, you're inputting, like you're saying, the new medications you're trying,
Hmm.
but alongside other events that are happening in your life, and we have the activity tracking, and if you have set up pacing alerts, you can set that up in a way that would most benefit you. So if you do have a crash, you can go back and you can look at your data and you can say, okay, what else might have been going on here? Yes, I started this new treatment, but was there anything else that may have been happening during this time? And you can look at your log and you can say, okay, wait, actually, my crash might have started right before I started that treatment, and because you have your daily rankings of different symptoms as well as your overall daily health. And you can say, oh, well, maybe that treatment didn't prevent the crash, but it might not have caused it because it looks like I was declining for like in the days or weeks before I started that treatment.
Right.
So I think just having that overall global perspective on your own symptom tracking and symptom data is really important. And we're trying to get menstrual health tracking added to the platform as well, so that patients can see how menstruation affects their overall symptom trajectory as well. And so we're working with Care Evolution to do that. So hopefully that'll be something that's coming up this year as well, because I think it's really important.
Is there any way to overlay different patterns? Like with my Aura Ring, I was able to uh, overlay my my readiness sleep score with my readiness score. And my sleep score, it tracked really closely with my readiness score. I could just see it going up, and that readiness score goes up. Activity, oddly enough, really didn't track all that well. And then with my partner, her readiness score did not track with her sleep score. There are other things determining it. Is there any way to like overlay these different patterns and see what tracks with what?
Right now, they wouldn't be overlaid on the same graph, and that's a technical. Care Evolution handles that side of it, so we don't
Hmm.
have kind of final say on that. So unfortunately, right now there is not a way to overlay on the same graph, but you should be able to look back at the same period of time and get the graphs on the same PDF. So that's what I
Hmm.
mean when I'm saying you can see, on the same, essentially you'll have the same x-axis on your graphs, and you can scroll down and see the different symptoms or flags that you've put in the data if you've started a new medication or something like that. And we're also
Right.
adding right now what we're building this since 2026 started is we're adding in the scoring
Scoring.
that people are getting on their validated survey tools. So you're
Mm.
providing us with this information if you're taking the validated survey tools, and we're putting it on the graphs, and we're going to provide it back to patients so they can see how they're doing long term over time according to these validated survey instruments. So that's what we're building right now with Care Evolution, and we're trying to input all of the scoring into the platform because that was data that we always had on the research side, and we want to make sure that people can access their own scores.
One other thing
Right.
too that you can do is there's a note section when you're tracking your symptoms for the day. There's a note section, and we have a staff member that actually tracks for her son. For He's a PANDAS patient, and if she has something just odd that happens in a day, she can note it, and it puts it as a timestamp on the calendar too. So maybe you forgot about something, and you can kind of look at your trend for the month, and then you look at the notes. Or if you have some weird symptoms that are new, you can add those into your symptoms that you're tracking. And, from every last little detail, you don't want to go crazy with it, but maybe there's some new things. And so making sure you add that, it could be like you start this new treatment and then you look, oh, before that, I had these symptoms starting, or maybe in conjunction, and then you could say it was more likely the treatment. Just some other additional things that you could do to make it a little more detailed.
You So this is one idea is this is a to help researchers recruit people to their studies, and I think this is kind of novel. They if they want to look at a certain subset of patient, if they want to look at, let's say, people with longer duration illness, or people who have they have low HRV readings, or whatever, any of this wearable data, people who are more severely ill, and and get them in the study. And so, are you having researchers? I know you just really started this platform. You've really come out over the last couple months, but have you had people contact you about helping them recruit patients into their studies?
Yeah, we're working with a number of them, and these projects are in development, I would say. We're applying for a number of grants right now so that people can, and we're helping to support the different researchers to apply for different awards that will allow these studies to be completed. But yeah, we're looking for, to support them in recruitment, but also in terms of long-term follow-up for the population. I would say that the long-term follow-up, for me coming from a biomedical research background, I think that is incredibly valuable as well. I think you're right in terms of the cost of recruitment, but I also do think that if you're designing a study that you're really excited about, it's a really good study, like unless you're looking for a very specific small segment of the population, recruitment is not quite the burden it could be in other cases. But if for long-term follow-up, a lot of people are lost to follow-up, and you might get some really interesting data. I did postmortem brain work, I did stem cell biology work before I got sick, and sometimes you would just get the most interesting sample, and you're like, is this an outlier? I'd like to get a little more data on this subject, and half of the questionnaires are not completed and this and that is done, and you've just spent like a year doing this research project, and then suddenly you don't have all this other information at your hands. So I think that the long-term follow-up capabilities in Unhide are just immense as well, and I think that's really attractive to researchers who have been in the field a while and have done a number of these studies. So yeah, we are getting approached, but you know how the funding is right now, Court. It's really tough for everyone in this field, and I think everyone in biomedical research in the U.S. right now is just struggling and scrambling. So yeah, right now we're in the grant writing process with a number of other hopeful future collaborators. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. I just want to say that whenever I see a study that it's chronological, that it follows patients over time, the researchers are always seem very happy to mention that because
Yeah.
it's rare and it's very important
Yeah.
and it helps validate the data. And so that's great. That's a great capability of Unhide. Okay, well, um, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Everybody should know that the Unhide platform is open for enrollment.
Yeah,
Um, if we're already in the SolveME database. You're in there.
that's right.
I got in there and accepted my password right away. I was very relieved about that. Um, and so yeah, it's easy to enroll. You can do it at your own pace, and you can put a ton of data in there, and it can only help. It can only help all of us. So thank you very much. Thank you
No,
much
thank
for
you,
doing
Court, and
this.
wishing you all the best for your own health as well. And yeah, thank you for all the work that you do. It's really
Yeah.
appreciated.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, yeah,
Thank you
and
for having me.
yeah, let's talk again when you have more to report.
Yeah.
We'd love
And
to.
yeah.
Yeah, and we'll send you the links to the webinar as well, so you can check that out from us
Oh,
for free.
good, good. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
All right.
Okay.
All
All
right.
Thank
right.
Thank
you
Well,
so
you.
thank you.
much.
All
Bye
right. Bye
bye.
bye.
And as always, I always forget to mention this, but there's always a blog linked with these talks, and the blog tends to go into deeper details about what we talked about. So be sure to check out the blog. Okay. Bye bye, everyone.